Hi. What happens when you play in the playground of possibility? Hey, South by Southwest, it is so good to be here today. I know that there's a million places to be, and time is one of our most precious resources, and that you're choosing to spend time here today. So I thank you for being here and part of this session. I also want to thank Hugh Forrest, who just introduced me, for all of his support and hard work over the 20, 30 years. He's helped to make the magic of South by Southwest possible, and all of the volunteers and all of the hard workers here. It's a very special convening that happens in Austin every March. And a massive thank you to Hugh Forrest for trusting me and one of my crazy ideas, and you guys will learn I have a lot of wild ideas, because this summer I came down, and I'm a super South by Southwest fan, so it's a huge honor to be a featured session today. And I met with Hugh at the headquarters, where I was a total Looney Tune tourist fan, and he mentioned, or we started talking, I was like, I have a podcast, Creativity Squared, that explores the intersection of AI and creativity, and Holly Herndon was a dream guest to be on the show. And I'm happy to say she is going to be on my 2025 podcast roster. Right now I have 2 booked, Holly, who's a Time 100 AI honoree, and another Time 100 AI honoree, King Wallonius. And I'm still booking people, so stay tuned for that season. But today really isn't about me. So Hugh wanted Holly Herndon on stage at South by Southwest, and I wanted Holly for my podcast. Holly, Dolly Parton, and I are all from East Tennessee. I grew up in Dolly Parton's hometown, and all 3 of us, which I find very interesting, have all been cloned. Dolly Parton actually got cloned back in, I think, 2016 for a holographic clone at her theme park in Dollywood. I'm the first resident in Cincinnati, Ohio, to have a hyper-realistic clone. And Holly Herndon is at the cutting edge of cloning and cloning your voice, and at the intersection. She's at the bleeding edge, so much so that South by wanted her here so you guys can listen to her at the intersection of what Hugh just said, at the intersection of AI, creativity, and music. And it's a very intimate session, so it's very special that you're all here today. And I mentioned Dolly Parton because where we're from informs a lot of who we are. And growing up in East Tennessee, you can't avoid Dolly Parton. We grew up with Dollywood, her theme park, the Imagination Library, and we were at the footsteps of the magical Smoky Mountains National Park. I grew up with theme parks and mini golf and a La La Land, which will make a whole lot more sense at the end of this presentation. I share this because Holly and I advocate for a human and artist-centered future, to protect our artists' dreams and their IP. Dolly Parton, one of our real-life superheroes, knows the value of protecting dreams, her dreams, and children's dreams. And if you don't know this about Dolly Parton, and I know it sounds odd talking about her at an AI talk, but she has the amazing Imagination Library that she founded because her father, because if you don't know this, Dolly Parton grew up without running water or electricity in East Tennessee and is now a world-renowned icon that everyone loves, and she's transcended politics too. And one of her giving back programs is the Imagination Age Library. And in that, she's given out millions, the number's very big, books to any kid from 0 to 5 years old, regardless of their income, because she knows the value of reading and seeding dreams. Holly came on my radar with her Vox interview in April of 2023. I had just launched my podcast that's home to the conversations shaping the imagination age. At the intersection of AI and creativity, she instantly became a dream guest. I found myself watching her TED Talk multiple times and found it fascinating. Her AI aesthetic Jolene video was just icing on the cake. Holly, through her life's work and her artistic work, is showing us how an artistic-centric future is within reach. And within reach, because also, I think we're leaving the information age and not going to the intelligence age. That's lacking a little imagination. We're going to the imagination age, and Holly is one of these amazing artists who knows how valuable her voice is and is helping showing us what's possible when you play in the playground of possibility. So without further ado, at the home of creativity and innovation that is South by Southwest, please join me in giving the biggest and warmest Texas welcome you can to Time 100 Most Influential Person and Imagination Age rock star, the one and only Holly Herndon.
Wow, that was quite the introduction. Thank you, Helen. And also thank you for so generously hosting me here at South by. It's really nice to be here with you all today. I'm going to talk a little bit about generative AI today. I know this is a hot button topic for a lot of people. It's become a bit of a culture war. I hope that we can talk about some of the more interesting aspects of this conversation today. So my background is as a musician. So these are the last two albums that I released on 4AD, Platform, and Proto. And my work has always been kind of investigating how technical systems impact creative decisions. So with Platform, I was really looking at the kind of platform paradigm of the time where, you know, whether or not you were distributing your music through Spotify or whether you were promoting your album on Instagram or whatever platform you were using, it had a direct impact on kind of creative choices that you were making as an artist. It also was trying to acknowledge that these platforms were mediating very personal relationships and interactions that we were having with our loved ones online. So fast forward to 2019, I released an album, Proto, where I'm dealing with machine learning. So I started working on machine learning for Proto around 2016. And this was really pre the generative AI boom that we're all living with today. And so it really required creating models from the ground up. And so the first kind of decision that you make there is, what do you train your model on? And it was just kind of an intuitive thing for me at that time as a musician to use my own music. It felt wrong to train on other people's music. So that became kind of like a fundamental tenet for the work that I've been doing for the past 10 years. So I've been really obsessed with the voice in my practice. I love the digitally processed voice, and I've been training machine learning on voices. And as I mentioned before, it's really important how you choose your training data. I didn't want to be Ursula from The Little Mermaid and try to steal someone's voice, so I decided to use my own voice. And so I trained a voice model on my own voice with a group of researchers in Barcelona called Voctro Labs. And we were able to create what I like to call Holly Plus. So it's kind of a digital twin, if you will. And there are several versions of Holly Plus, but one version I presented in 2022 at TED, and this is a real-time version where you can actually sing through my voice. So I'm trying to rethink a little bit IP. So rather than thinking about intellectual property, I started thinking about it in terms of identity play. What if our identities and our IP is something that we could make available for other people to use in a consensual way? Like, what kind of weird performances and new art forms could come out of that? So this is, I'll just play you a clip from this so you can kind of hear it for yourselves what it sounds like.
And with this microphone, you'll hear a live version of Holly Plus developed with Voctro Labs.
So that was really fun because, I mean, you know, I should play the whole thing because Fur has this beautiful voice and he does this duet with his voice and my voice, and it's just really interesting to see it in real time because we're so used to seeing kind of deep fakes online, and there's this really nefarious undertone to that. So I was kind of asking myself, is there actually a creative application to this? Could this actually be something that's really cool and really fun? Excuse me. If this was done in a consensual way. So we created Holly Plus as a web interface where people could just drag and drop samples onto the web interface, and it would spit out a sample that was transferred, the timbre transfer, into my voice. And this was a really kind of scary experiment because I was making it freely available to everyone to just like drag whatever sound they wanted to and kind of put my voice on it. But I really wanted to have a permissive approach to IP and really see how far we could take it. And I was also at the time experimenting with different kind of economic models or structures. This was all during COVID, so there was a lot of like, you know, crazy experiments happening from our bedrooms. So we put together what's called a DAO. If any of you all are familiar with DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, you know, we say autonomous. It was really just kind of like a discord of friends who were interested in this project, and we would kind of vote on use cases, and so we decided to sell some of the works that were created with my voice and do a kind of profit share model. So the artists who would make work with the voice would get half. Let's call it a co-op. The co-op would get the other half, and then that money would go back into developing more tools. And so at the time, it was still pretty early. We were doing a lot of, you know, really janky kind of on-chain royalty splits on Ethereum. A lot of that stuff's way more developed now. But it was really kind of a proof of concept, and I think it worked really well because not only was I able to make my IP available for other people to use, but because we had this kind of virtuous cycle of kind of paying for the tools, it felt like we were kind of all invested in something moving together forward. So I want to play you one other example of the Holly Plus system. This is, of course, Helen mentioned that we're both from East Tennessee. So Dolly Parton is a huge hero of mine. And so I've always wanted to cover her song Jolene, but I never felt the confidence to sing that in the studio. As such a Dolly fan, I had her on a pedestal. But somehow it was easier to allow my digital twin to sing that for me. So I teamed up with Ryan Norris, who played the acoustic guitar and synthesizers in this track. And then I got my friend Sam Rolfs to direct this video. And he also made a visual digital avatar of me as a character, and then wore a motion capture suit and then performed as me. So we're really taking the kind of like identity play to the next level. And it's really fun to watch him perform as me because he dances in a way that I would never dance. He's a gamer, so he's kind of like sitting in his chair with. Anyways, you'll see. It's just really fun and uncanny to see how someone else would perform me. So that voice is entirely generated, and I don't know if you can notice there's like a couple oddities in some of the pronunciations, but I left some of that in there because I wanted you to be able to hear that it was generated. So a lot of the work that I've been doing has been really focused on where the data comes from with models. So after my TED Talk, I was talking to some people who were working in the AI space, and I had the opportunity to found an organization called Spawning with my partner, Matt Dryhurst, and a machine learning engineer, Jordan Meyer. Excuse me. And so it's really an organization dedicated to building tools for manners, digital manners, in the kind of AI era. So one of the first things that we built is called Have I Been Trained? And this is basically a site where you can go and it's in the image space, but you can go and search your name and see if any of your images have been used in any of the large image models, so if they've been scraped up in some of the large training sets. So a lot of artists have used this tool and have found, yes, I am being trained, and no, I don't like it. So the next step was to build an opt-out system. So we built a do not train registry, and this has been integrated into Hugging Face, which for those of you who are not familiar, Hugging Face is a place where a lot of developers go to get training data, and so it's integrated into their platform. So a lot of developers are choosing to honor this opt-out, and a lot of the larger AI companies are as well. We also offer a browser extension, so you can plop that on your browser, and then when the crawlers come through, it automatically tells the crawlers, like, no thank you, I'm opting out of this. So that's the kind of light touch way of dealing with this. There's also the kind of, Elmo and hell burning, more defensive approach that we have experimented with, and that's called the Kuduro network. And so the Kuduro network identifies active scrapers and alerts the network to misdirect all requests from scrapers for the duration of the scraping. So what we did is we bought a bunch of domains and created this network, and we turned it on a couple times just to see if it would work. And so you'll see on this graph there are two kind of major dips. This is a graph of all of the global training that's happening, and there's two moments where it kind of drops off. And those are the moments when we turned on the Kuduro network. And you could see in the kind of dev discords and chats, like, hey, did your training stall? What's going on? What's going on here? Is something broken? So this is not the ideal approach, but this is kind of the, if we don't come up with a solution that really honors creators and IP holders in this kind of generative AI ecosystem, then we're headed towards a situation where the internet becomes less open and free, becomes more locked down, and we have to have a more defensive approach. This is something that I don't want to see happen. I actually really love the open internet. I love free access to information. And so I'm hoping that we don't end up with a kind of balkanized internet. So I usually train on my own models, but I was really curious as some of these larger generative AI models were becoming really popular. I was really curious to dive into them a little bit and try to understand some of the concepts a little bit further. So OpenAI has a model called CLIP. It's a commonly used classifier for image models. And so I, as a public figure, am in the model. There's a concept of me in the model. There's enough images of me online with my name tagged that I am a concept, or in machine learning, this is called an embedding. So when you have an embedding of a glass, it's usually going to be something that contains water, or if you have an embedding of a cloud, it's usually going to be something like white and fluffy. People are also embeddings, and so are kind of really fuzzy concepts like beauty. That's why we see a lot of, when you have subjective ideas like beauty or love, some of these models start to fall apart a little bit because we all have very different ideas of what these concepts are. But so I really wanted to understand what Holly Herndon is as an embedding, and it turns out that I am an orange blob of hair. If I was a bit more famous, I would have a fully formed face and I would have, all of my features, but I'm not quite famous enough, so it just kind of like latches on to this one thing that's the most kind of memorable about me. So in a way, I'm my pastiche. So I was asking myself, how much agency do we have in these models to kind of self-determine who we are? That was the dream of the internet, right? That we could be whoever we wanted to be. That's the famous New Yorker cartoon that, even no one knows you're a dog on the internet. So I was asking, okay, can I have some kind of self-determination here? Can I have some sort of agency? And I was, we ran some tests, and we realized if we created a character that was too far outside of my pastiche, that it would just be thrown away as noise. So we decided to really lean into my pastiche, and so I worked with a costume designer named Franziska Müller in Berlin, and we created this creature that we call X Hairy Mutant X. And this is my superhero, alter ego. And we took a ton of photos of me wearing this custom costume where I'm really leaning into my pastiche, and then we made a model where we created this, fully created this character. So this was part of a project that we exhibited in the Whitney Biennial last year, 2024. And so as part of this project, they showed the diptych of this character, but The real project happened online, where the Whitney hosted a website where anyone could go there and kind of prompt through the model and make their own images, because models want to be interacted with. So I made some for you guys today. You can go to xharrymutantx.whitney.org and make your own. These are special for today: poodles eating noodles in front of a Texan landscape, and cowgirl grannies in the knitting circle in Austin, Texas. And so they're all kind of infected with the xharrymutantx-like aesthetic, the orange hairy blob. And so you might be asking why I went to all this trouble. Because this model was hosted on the Whitney website, when scraping occurs, there's a kind of hierarchy of ranking in the kind of truthiness of the website. So because the Whitney is a very trusted institution and source of information, the images and tags that are hosted on that site have a higher ranking. So the next time that the scrapers come through and the next models that are created, my name is attached to thousands of images with this kind of superhero-like figure, or a kind of holliness that is this giant orange hair. So it's kind of a long-form performance, interactive performance with the audience, who have created thousands of images through this website, through developers who are using this data to make models. Yeah, and it's kind of inherently collaborative, which is what I find so interesting and exciting about these systems. So I encourage you to go make your own later today. So experimenting with my voice and image is one thing, but another question that I've had is, how do we work with collectively created data? We all know that data is often relational. It's almost really difficult to kind of draw a clean line around just your data. So I was asking myself, okay, how could we make AI in a really beautiful way from the ground up with a large group of people? So this is a still from an exhibition that we opened last November at the Serpentine in London, and it's called The Call. So when you walk in, this is our fan organ. It's actually an acoustic instrument that we built, where MIDI controllers control the speed of GPU fans to play 4-part harmonies. So it's an actual functioning organ. We wanted to bring in the sound of GPUs into the exhibition space, because that's the sound of our studio, just kind of like whirring GPUs. And this is the catalog of the book that we released along with it. All media is training data, and we put this really kind of bold statement on the cover, knowing that this would be a polemic for a lot of people, knowing that a lot of people would read it and think, all that media is training data. And that's, of course, not what it's saying. It's saying all media is potentially training data. What if we see the creation of training data and the creation of AI models as a new form of art, as a new art medium? And so in order to do that, we decided to take a full stack approach. So really having moments of creative intervention at each step of the model making process. So from the data collection, those were performances with real human beings in rooms, making creative decisions about how to perform, to the data labeling. That sounds like a very boring and bureaucratic job, but really an important and creative role in how you can even kind of like navigate the model with language later. And then, of course, the AI model making itself, and then the public interactions with those models, and my interactions as an artist with those models. Each step, there are so many moments for creativity. There's so much fear out there about generative AI automating all creativity away, but our approach was really to see creative decisions at each kind of step in the process. So we started at the very beginning. We wrote a songbook for training AI, and this kind of came out of me training my own voice models over the years, and usually I would just kind of sing nonsense from like the lowest part of my range to the highest part of my range. And so I thought, what if I wrote an actual songbook to cover the entirety of my range, all of the phonemes of the English language, so I could train an AI but make music out of it? So that's what the songbook is. And I think on the next slide I might have an example. And so we took that songbook and we went on a tour across the UK, and we recorded a really wide range of choirs, from kind of community choirs in rural Scotland to like pro choirs in Bristol. And I'll just play you a little example of one of the recordings. This is from the Fitzharding Consort in Bristol, which is a very classic British a cappella choir. sake of time, I'm going to move on. But when we went on the tour across the UK, we not only recorded the choirs, but we also piloted what's called a data trust. So choirs are really unique in that they already have a kind of democratic process, so it was a really great group to kind of try out some of these ideas with. And so what we did is we hired a data trustee to kind of manage all of the desires of the group, and the choirs actually all co-own and co-manage the data set. And so as an artist working with their data set for the exhibition, I had to negotiate with them. I had to negotiate with the data trust to actually use the work in the show. And this was really an experiment to see, how much time do people want to spend on governing their data? Like, just asking people really simple questions about what kind of fears they have around their data usage. And a lot of people, would have kind of fear around working on this project, but then would upload their music to various platforms that are also using their material to train AI models. So it was a really interesting kind of educational component to it. And it was really an important aspect to us that the collective could kind of co-own and co-shepherd the way that the data was used. So I'm going to play an example from the output of the model, and I personally think it's really beautiful because it is trained on this very specific data set, and I think you can really hear the humanity and the, all of the beautiful humans that went into creating the model. So for the sake of time, I'm going to move on. But I was kind of blown away at the model's ability to really create coherent musical structure over like a 3-minute period. I think it's really, personally, I think it's really beautiful. I hope you do too. Also, as part of the show, we created what we call the oratory, where we invited the public to sing through the group voice model. The idea is submission to something that's greater than the sum of its part, to really create a kind of sacred or beautiful public AI. So that's something that I want to close on here. It's what I'm really excited about at the moment. At Spawning, we released PD12M, which is the largest public domain image data set, also trending on Hugging Face. So our experience with the data trust is people were really glad to be asked to be involved in the use of their data. They're not really used to being asked for consent, so people were really grateful to that. And then after the long process, people were actually really willing to put that work into the public domain, understanding that people would be using it in any way that they wanted, because they felt like they would be contributing to something greater than themselves, which I thought was a really beautiful conclusion. So we're also, we're using our large public training set to create public diffusion. It's only 25% trained as of today, because as you know, compute is really expensive, so we're trying to work out how to get the rest of it trained. But we're really excited about this idea of having a fully public domain base layer model, and the reason why we see that as important, this is in the image domain. I can see this scaling to other modalities in the future, but imagine you're a visual artist. If you have a fully public domain base layer model, you can fine tune on your own work, and then you can sell access to that model, or you can sell that model as an artwork. Rest assured that you haven't infringed on another artist's work. Rest assured that you won't have a kind of lawsuit on your hands 5 years from now. And also just knowing that you're not stealing from anyone else. So I see this as a really important kind of first step for a lot of artists who are kind of apprehensive to get involved in the image model space. So here's a test that we ran. We have a lot of landscapes, so I'm juicing this a little bit because that's kind of an area of the model that's it's a little bit better than some of the other models. Apparently, corgis, there's like no public domain images of corgis, so it's like a black hole in the model. But landscapes, we have a lot of those. And so you can see on the left is public diffusion, and on the right is flux, which is a really popular image model. And you can see there it's somewhat competitive. So yeah, I'm really excited to continue down the public domain path and continue to build on that also in the audio realm, so that artists can, more artists can get involved, and that we have a kind of public tool that everyone feels good and confident in using. So I think I'm going to do a fireside chat with Helen now. I really appreciate your time today. I know there are so many amazing talks happening, so that you guys came here to see us. I appreciate it.
And as a massive South by Southwest panel nerd, I know you all probably have questions for us, and I'm hogging them all, so I pre-apologize. But you can subscribe to Creativity Squared, and Holly will be on the show. And you can submit questions ahead of that, and I'll take them into consideration when we find time to do the interview this year. Thank you. This was one of my favorite sessions ever, so thank you, Holly. So to begin with, what do you get excited about in the morning?
Well, I have a toddler, so first things first is getting toddler settled for the day. And then once that has happened, then I work really closely with my life partner, Matt Dryhurst, and we are in this incredible privileged position to really work as conceptual artists. And we're describing our work these days as protocol art, because we don't think about individual pieces of media as the final piece of art. It's really the whole system. It's the interaction with the public. It's the technology that we build in order to make the works. We see these as protocols, ways of making art. And so we get really excited to think about new protocols, new interactions, new ways of approaching really complicated and sticky questions of our day.
Now, you really nerd out at the intersection of AI and creativity. And one thing I didn't do in the interview is your actual education background, which when I read it was very interesting. So could you actually tell us how you got so interested with your background? Or tell us your education background.
Yeah, I had a kind of an unusual educational journey. I did undergraduate at GW, and that really wasn't the right fit for me. So when I graduated, I moved to Berlin for a couple years, and I was kind of a club kid, and I was, just worked in nightlife and was making music, and then I realized that I really wanted to level up, and I wanted to go to grad school, and I was making experimental electronic music, but I really wanted to learn from the greats, and so I went to Mills College, which is actually no longer around, RIP, but that was a really amazing experimental electronic music program with people like John Bischoff and Maggie Payne. John Cage went there, Merce Cunningham, all these kind of, Paulina Olivieros was teaching there. So for electronic music nerds, that's it was an amazing place to be. And so I got my master's there, and then I applied to Stanford, which has a department called CARMA, the Center for Computer Research in Music and Acoustics, and I kind of applied with a long shot, not thinking that they would accept me, but lo and behold, they accepted me, and I guess that's the journey.
Well, and can you share, because you said that you don't think that you're a good singer, which I find fascinating because she's a Time 100 icon, people. Share why, and then how you got into using your computer as an art form.
Yeah, I never really thought of myself as a vocalist. I mean, I trained on my voice because that felt like the right thing to do. I didn't want to ask someone else to give me their voice when this field is so experimental and it's really unclear. At the time, it was unclear where everything was going. I think it's a little bit more clear now. So that's why I used my voice, but my voice was just what was convenient. I really see myself as an artist, as a producer, as a technological tinkerer, and I have so much respect for people who dedicate their lives to a vocal practice. That's why I don't feel comfortable saying I'm a vocalist, because that's not what I wake up in the morning and do, and I really, hold that in high regard.
I love that. I'm at a different career stage. I get to mess up a little bit more, but that's okay. And the one thing I love about the Holly Dolly thing, we're at 3 different career stages. I'm kind of breaking out. This is my first featured session, and Holly has been on the Time 100, and then Dolly is like an icon. And it sounds like with your hair project that you want to get more of your face shown on the internet too. So congratulations on that. So when we were prepping, you shared that your studio, so there's less than, if the future and the imagination age is going to be the creator economy, there's a statistic that less than 5% of creators that have taken a survey that want to be professional creators make over $100,000. How is that going to be a sustainable industry and career if the creators aren't getting paid? So I want to know, I learned in our prep that Holly has her studio booked out 2 years in advance, which is awesome. Congratulations on that. What is your strategy and your approach to your art, both from the conceptual side, because you're playing in that, and then like how are you booked out 2 years in advance? Because that's amazing.
I think actually a lot of it's luck. I just happened to get really excited and interested in machine learning in 2016 before anyone really cared, or before a kind of wider audience of people cared about it. It was kind of in the nerd territory back then. And because I started back then, I really kind of developed my own approach to the subject, and then it just kind of blew up and it became this topic that everyone wants to talk about. So in a way, it was just a bit of a lucky kind of break that what I was working on just happened to become really popular. I think, obviously the tech world is this kind of like large looming aspect of our economy, so to be working in something that is related to that, I think has probably made the practice more sustainable. I also know many artists that are working tangentially to the fashion industry, for example. So often, I think to make a creative career sustainable in the long run, it's often not just dealing with one kind of focus, but working across sectors.
And what are some of your goals that you have for the next iteration of your performance, since it's a long-term thing and your identity play? So what's next on your goals?
Well, I'm really excited about continuing with public diffusion. I really want to see that model fully trained. I want to see what artists do with that. My partner and I are building out our studio at the moment. We just started doing exhibitions, so the Call was our first large-scale exhibition. I'm excited about that as a new kind of form coming as a performing musician. It's been a bit of a black box to kind of understand and learn how that whole system works, but it's an entirely different way, a kind of like slower paced, in a way of communicating with people. And ultimately, that's what I think we do as artists. Whether it's kind of a book or a concert or an exhibition, we're finding ways to deal with complicated subject matters and to communicate that with the public. And the communication part is really important to me. I don't ever want things to be so kind of obtuse or abstract that I'm not bringing people along with me. It might be weird at first, but I still want people to kind of come along with me. So yeah, just continuing to find new modalities for that is, I guess, what we're excited about.
And in terms of, because if you guys don't know, Grimes has put her voice on a DAO and experimented with making money that way. Have you thought about the Grimes experiment as far as making money with any of your clones in that way as a potential revenue stream for you too?
We've talked about it before. Yeah, she knows about Holly Plus, and so who knows? Maybe one day in the future we'll do something together. I do think that the digital twin space is a really interesting and weird world, and we're going to see a lot more of that in the future. This experiment that I did in 2021 was really early days, and so it was kind of janky and kind of thrown together. But yeah, I think as those kind of tools develop, it's really interesting to be able to co-create with people. And I think people that have fandoms, there's this kind of impulse to be like, oh, I really want to protect my copyright, or oh, I really want to control everything. But at the end of the day, it's actually really interesting and generative to see what your audience can create with you, as long as there's kind of like rails on that for, whether it's an approval mechanism or, some kind of rails so that the person whose IP is being used feels respected in the process.
Well, I kind of see it as, there's already so much fan fiction, and like any brand like Disney or Star Wars, Dune, name it, has an entire universe already where people are contributing, whether social media, whole fan fiction, that now if it's on a DAO or NFT and blockchain, all the buzzwords, that if you did it, that all of the community that's creating the universe can get a share of it too. That seems more generative to me. Is that something, and I guess I don't know technically the difference between like an NFT on a DAO to do that, but it seems like it's technically possible, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a bunch of different models that are possible. It doesn't necessarily have to use a blockchain. I think that's why we really like this framing of protocol art, because it's not about trying to control a process as something that the artist owns alone. It's more about setting up a kind of rule set where you want people to take the idea and fork it and run with it. It's actually more interesting for the original work itself if it's copied, if it's cloned, if it's iterated on. I think that's a more interesting and generative approach to where all of this is going, and so that's why we're using that framing.
Oh, what's funny that came to mind in the audience is like, I love that you're doing identity play in a digital space. And Michael Kopaj, who's here, big Snoop, he and I'm now baby Martha, we're doing identity play in social media. And then to a certain extent, that's what memes are, is you take something, a culturally viral thing, and then just build on it, and that's what goes viral. So like that's what naturally happens in culture. Just the way that it's set up right now, it's not generative and takes care of everyone like a garden. It's more extractive like in the information age. But you give me a lot of hope that we're going more to the imagination. So given the seat that you sit in as a Time100 AI honoree, can I say that again? Two girls from East Tennessee on stage at South by, and you manifested this. You wanted to be on stage and level up, and look where you have leveled up. So that's amazing. So clap, please. So given the seat that you sit in, and I'm clearly a super fan, if I was one of these tech CEOs that I know listen to artists too, because I've seen some of the talks beyond all the media coverage that they do listen to artists, but we still have a lot of notes for them. What are your notes that you want these tech execs to know as one of the most important AI voices in the information age and the imagination age?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the products that tech CEOs, I guess, are working on these days have these kind of downstream, like really, really big impacts on creators' lives, kind of downstream. And so I think involving them earlier in the process is really important. I mean, one thing that I learned, I've been in touch with many companies over the years, and when I was approached as an artist, I was kind of listened in one way, and then when I started spawning and was actually building tools myself, I was kind of listened to in a different way, kind of taken a bit more seriously. And so noticing that kind of difference between those two, I think it would be great if artists are not treated as kind of like cute entertainment, but rather as people with ideas and agency in the world who are very invested in culture moving forward. I'm a culture person. I care about culture being sustainable, and it's more fun if more people can play along. So I think, just taking people's concerns seriously. If you're building a company, you're focused on trying to make your product the best, right? I think we also sometimes expect too much from companies. We also need to ask this of our governments and of our thought leaders. If a technology is going to come in and kind of change the social fabric and kind of require a new social contract. That's something that we all have to decide on together. That's not something that should or could come from a CEO. And so in order to do that, we all have to be really informed. We can't play into a kind of oversimplified narrative, which is what AI has become in the kind of culture war, kind of pro or anti, and there's a whole sexy middle ground with a lot of nuance and a lot of really interesting arguments. And I think the more people that are really, really deeply informed on this topic and can really argue and work it out, then I think the better the outcome will be.
Yes, thank you. Ones and zeros are so binary, and we've already crossed the rainbow into Technicolor. We got to prepare for immersive, and not everyone's ready for that yet. But since we're going there, and actually, I do have a new question, because you mentioned that one of the interesting things with subjective things like love, that it's one of the challenges, and I actually submitted, I didn't tell you this, one of the OpenAI grants for $100,000 and it was based on an algorithm based on love. But can you share why the subjective nature is so hard again? Because and we have so many people that like language, big Snoop over there. Well, can you explain why subjective words are so hard for the models? Because that was interesting to me.
Well, I mean, they're scraping the commercial web, so they're learning from advertorial language, and they're not inside of our. It would be very different if we all wrote down really personal, subjective diaries, and then we submitted that all to a model maker. No one wants to do that right now, but that would create a very different model than the kind of like advertising web, which is currently what's training most of these models. It's also an issue of it being, trying to cover a lot of ground. So, when you're trying to, it's basically just like a huge generalization. Whereas I see maybe a more interesting path as kind of more personalized subjective models that are more personal to an individual. But if you're trying to define the concept of like bottle across cultures across the globe, there are kind of some really fundamental bottleness features, that it's going to have a lid and it's going to have a certain shape or whatever. But when it comes to something like love or beauty, these are subjective concepts. There is no way to have or you can average it, but you're just going to get a very mid and kind of unsatisfying answer there.
Interesting. Well, I'm short on time, but I'm going to noodle on that and come back with another question for when we do the interview for my podcast. So we have 1:30 left. What is your best case scenario? What does Holly Herndon's imagination age look like?
I guess the best case scenario is that we kind of enter a time when people are collaborating and creating in ways that we couldn't imagine before, with the past archive, with the present kind of vast amounts of people, and kind of sending beautiful, what I like to call mind children, beautiful data to the future so that future generations can collaborate with us further.
You know what I love about that? I went to Filmgate Miami Immersive Film Festival, which you should go to that. It's fabulous. And that's where I did the interview with King Wallonius for my 75th episode, which is also fabulous. But one of the things that I learned there, that the indigenous, the indigenous communities think 7 generations in advance. The information age thinks in quarters, 3 months. You make very different decisions when you think in generations versus 3 months. And I love that your long-term performance and sending things off into the future and thinking that long. So I'm going to end this because, a lot of people are lacking imagination, and we're showing how to think expansively and what's possible when we play in the playground of possibility. So tonight we're launching a party to celebrate the launch of the Imagination Age. You're all invited, 10 p.m. at Kingdom. It's running 72 hours and ends Wednesday at 8 a.m. And we have over 30 DJs for 24/7 partying. So the late night when Austin stops at 2 a.m. To 7 a.m., we got you. And I'm helping you prepare to think abundantly and how we're all going to be celebrating our artists like Holly in the Imagination Age. So I hope to see you there. We're running for 72 hours, so you can pop by anytime, starting 10 p.m. tonight at Kingdom. So Oh, well, I will be there at 10 p.m. tonight. Holly, that is not in her contract, so she gets to decide if she joins, but she is invited. So, welcome to the Imagination Age, and let's give a big round of applause to Holly Herndon.
Thank you.